For the debate, the mother languages of the speakers are Danish, German, Greek. Then you can ask in any one of these languages if you want, or English as well. And we can translate into Spanish, into English if you want to ask in Spanish. And I see that there's maybe a Danish speaker.
I am Danish, of course. You can look at my eyes. Yes. I'll try to do my best in English first and then in Spanish. I have two questions. One is for Professor Möslein, and the second one is a general question. The first question is, at the moment, because of the non-financial directive, only the biggest companies, the companies of public interest, we can say, are have that disclosure duty. Do you think that in the future smaller companies will have that duty of disclosure duty about non-financial information? That's the first question. And the second question would be, in general, it's quite a general question, I said that. It's a difficult one, what is social interest for you? Do you think it's related to stakeholders and not only with shareholders? That's the general one. Thank you very much in advance. Estaba diciendo, preguntándoles dos cuestiones a los ponentes que han hecho. Well, thank you for your brilliant presentations. I didn't say that. Que gracias por sus brillantes presentaciones. Y le preguntaba en primer lugar al profesor Möslein que actualmente por la directiva relativa a la información no financiera, solo las empresas de interés público, que son las más grandes, son las que tienen obligación de hacer informes de información no financiera, de responsabilidad social corporativa. Le preguntaba si en su opinión, a futuro también empresas más pequeñas, no solo las de interés público, van a tener, pues como consecuencia de la necesidad del crecimiento sostenible que estaba destacando él en su intervención, obligación de emitir ese tipo de informes de información no financiera. Y luego les preguntaba en general a todos los ponentes cuál era su opinión sobre el concepto de interés social, que es un concepto complejo, que aquí en España pues tenemos posturas encontradas, como saben, y les preguntaba si pensaban que estaba relacionado con los intereses de los grupos de interés y no solo con los accionistas. Gracias.
Many thanks for this question. I leave the general one to the floor, but start with answering the specific one, which is difficult enough, but also interesting. And I think it links to also to Hanne's presentation. If you remember, in this mapping on this mapping slide, she mentioned the variance of shareholders' duties, and also the fact that shareholders' duties and obligations in general relate to the types of companies. Now, the specific example that you have mentioned, and that relates to sustainability obligations, is a nice example for that, because in the directive of non-financial reporting that you have mentioned, the focus is on companies of general interest, that is, the huge companies. In the action plan, the focus is on listed companies. So maybe an overlapping focus, but still a different one. The criteria in the non-financial directive is on size and also on the sector a bit. And the other focus is really on the question of listing or not. And then you have, at least in national law, you have more specific obligations that are related to the economic sector. You have more intensive obligations for some parts of the industry or for the banking and financial industry. The question really is, which of these strategies is the most promising and the most efficient ones? If you just lean back and think about it, it would be to focus on those companies who have the biggest impact on sustainability issues, those who have most emissions, who are polluting the environment the most. But the dynamics of rulemaking are different. And much depends on the directorate of the Commission, who is thinking about new regulations, on competences, on the mechanics of legislation and rulemaking, and therefore I think we have a different picture in what we see in the legislation, and what would make sense. In the long term, I think these more specific obligations will spread also towards smaller companies, but for the time being, the starting point is a bit difficult to explain and maybe not the most rational one. Thank you. The general question.
The general question, does anybody want to?
Well, I would like to give it a shot because it's definitely a difficult question. But I think what we try to do in our paper is because when you use the term stakeholders, it's very unclear. You can define stakeholders in many different ways, and what we try to do in our paper is sort of differentiate between the stakeholders that are close to the company and sort of has a contractual relationship to the company, such as employees, creditors, customers, and so on. And then you have a wider group of stakeholders that doesn't really have a contractual close relationship to the company, but definitely has an interest in the running of the company. And I think if you look at that wider group of stakeholders, I think you would definitely find that society's interest has an impact as well, even though you can't really define what society's interests are. But I think, especially if you look at the amended Shareholder Rights Directive and the action plan for sustainable financing, you definitely find very clear indications that you should understand societal interest as something more than just the financial interest, no matter how you define financial interest. So they talk about social interest as well, and I think social interest is a term that has a really wide impact, but you can't really sort of transform it into money or into a financial definition. So I think there are some indications that society's interest is something that has to be included, even though we can't define exactly what is meant by society's interest.
Just very, very briefly as well, I guess I would say, like, as well as on the social interest point, it's one of these phrases, I guess, that depends on the context, how you understand it. And sometimes when you use the phrase, like, mainly in Germany, I guess we have a relativity of legal terms, which in German sounds better because it's Relativität der Rechtsbegriffe, so it kind of rhymes a bit. And think like, I don't know actually the Spanish situation, but I think in France, they have Interés social in their company law. Or if it's in the law, actually, obviously, you would interpret it then in a particular context. A bit like, I guess, other terms like fairness or good faith, who are also like these general terms that need to be interpreted in the context. So, and I think that would also be like, I guess, for social interest, it may depend on the context where you find it, whether in the context of director's duties or perhaps like disclosure obligations. And that's, I guess, like perhaps a plausible way to handle it. Like, not to say it's too vague and therefore we can't use it, but to say it's too vague and therefore we have to interpret it in the context in which it's used.
Thank you, everyone, for your wonderful presentations. And my question goes for Professor Birkmose. I'm fully aware of your huge work mapping all these questions around Europe, and it was more just to know which country and why is more protective towards the social interest.
Well, yeah, the winners, no. I really don't know, because I think it depends on, again, like Mathias said, in which context you look at it, because my guess is that you would, if you look at it in a larger scale, you could exclude some places of the world, like the US. I would say they definitely don't have a really especially in company law context, they don't have an understanding of the social interest. So we have to look to Europe to find the winner. And I think that if you look to different areas, for instance, Norway is one of the countries that in some areas has been front runner. I think if you think about social interest in relation to social security and employees, maybe you should look to Germany. So I think there could be different winners in different aspects. So, and I also have to give a disclaimer that in our mapping exercise, we haven't been looking at specific countries. We have more been looking at it in a general overview. So I'm sorry, I can't answer that. I can give you some indications, but I don't think there's a clear answer to that. I don't know if Florian wants to supplement that.
To make things even worse, I would contradict Hanne, which I rarely do, but in this case, with respect to what you mentioned about the US, I agree in principle, but we have an interesting development there, because apart from the normal companies that are shareholder value oriented, we have a new form of companies popping up, the benefit corporations, who explicitly combine social interest and economic interests. So it's interesting to see that in a country where the level is low, we have something to supplement it.
And also in Italy, and I think that also in Colombia, yes.
The most important countries.
Yes. And I think that everybody has another question, which is, wasn't there a coffee break at 11 o'clock? And there was, and there is. Thank you very much to the speakers and to you.